31, day 31 of quarantine, Anzac Day, Saturday, 25th of April. And of course, it is Pajama Party Saturday. I'm here in my PJs today. And of course, I'm joined by Ethan. He's just winding up some yarn. But while he is doing that, apologies for the technology yesterday. The internet just decided it didn't love me anymore and it stopped working. And you know what? That's okay. That is okay. So yes, the technology just decided not going to work anymore, and it was just, you know, 'tis what it was. But there you go. So I'm going to do part 2 probably tomorrow. So part 2 of the sort of pilling yarns to prevent pilling, how to treat pilling, and all of that part 2 will be tomorrow. But of course, I am always, as always, on a Saturday morning, joined by the fabulous Ethan. How are you? Good morning. Good morning.
He's good morning.
Madly winding up yarn because we thought we'd even attempt some demonstrations this morning.
I know it's a risky bet, folks, but we will get through it together.
We will. And so we've had a lot on this week. We've both been incredibly busy. We've both done a lot of knitting. So we thought we'd kick off with that first and show you what we've got on our needles.
Yes.
And then from there, we're going to actually, someone requested some ideas about looking at some cast on and cast offs. And fortunately, you have got a million samples there with a whole variety of different cast on and cast offs. Me, not so much. This is good. But first off, do I detect a sleeve?
You do detect the first of 2 sleeves happening on a big blue monstrosity. So everyone, I have been really digging in on the extra texture situation, and so forgive me, I'm going to disappear. We have all 3 colors in existence.
Yep.
Ooh, and the first sleeve on the go. So this big boy is the large size of the 4 sizes. There's a small, a medium, and an extra large, a large and an extra large. I made the large mostly because I wanted something delightfully oversized. I am in love with it, actually. It has a very dramatic look once you have it on. It is quite enjoyable to knit because you're knitting pretty much entirely in the round. There is a ton of stockinette in between those cable rows. And we have a bind off success here on the bottom. Woo!
That looks nice and springy.
Yes, I used which we'll go over in a little bit. I intentionally, thinking about this, did the ribbed cabled bind off method, which is a bind off that uses decreases instead of passed over stitches. So it operates in a slightly different fashion, and it creates a beautifully stretchy edge that has if I bring it right up close to the camera, you can see the decorative effect of it.
It's right, like little knobbles at the end of the...
It crosses over the knit stitches. And what it does is it mirrors the ribbed cabled cast on. So you get both effects in the garment, so all of the edges will match, which is a little bit of a thing for me. I have to have them all matching or I go a little insane.
OCD much? Not so, you know, just saying.
Look, obsessive compulsive, particular, insane, all have been used to describe me in the past. I am not affronted by it any longer. I've learned to embrace it.
Well, that is looking fantastic. And of course, for those who haven't caught up with this before, and I'm a bit slow, I haven't put my Ravelry up, that is the extra texture sweater from Stephen Webb.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'll just, I'll make sure I get my Rav page up so I can put that link in. Now, I've been busy too. And let me just, oh gosh, and now I've got
yes.
Here. And I'm just going to stick this in I should have. I'm just going to put this in my stitch folder. So there it is. Right, let me just fire this in here. And it's because I was working on it literally just before I shot out to the shed. So let me just, right, and let me just do this.
Come back and join me.
There we go.
There we are.
There we are.
Oh, the Rambler. Oh my goodness. Have you done both sleeves already?
Yeah.
Oh, and that little detailing around the cuff looks beautiful.
I know, I'm really happy with it. And what I ended up doing is I reversed the colors out because I just felt that they worked better in that order on the cuff.
I think it looks great.
Yeah, really happy with it. And I'm going to, but I'm not going to do any detailing actually on the bottom.
You're just going to leave it plain.
I'm just going to leave it plain. And I'm going to do that for a very, very deliberate reason, because it's when it comes down, it's going to fall sort of around just below my hip bone probably. And I am going to be putting a slight A-line in there. And the last thing that I want to do is create some contrast at the bottom to create a very deliberate wide line and triangle, because from a silhouette perspective, that will just be, I want all the attention to be
not necessarily what you're looking for.
No, not necessarily what I'm looking for. But no, I'm really happy with this. So I'm literally now just into the body. I've done my first increase. So I did it. I went probably a good, at least 7 centimeters. And probably being black, you probably won't pick it up. But I did my first increase in there, and I just did a very, very subtle rightward and leftward leaning make one.
Yeah, perfect.
So it's quite invisible. And it will just hopefully just be very, and I'll probably do that increase every 8 to 10 stitches, so it's not going to be a particularly dramatic increase. And I've timed it, so theoretically I've started that increase below the bottom of my bust line, so like, yeah.
Giving you that beautiful classic A-line shape.
Yeah, that's the plan. So and so the nice thing about that where I'm at now is it's really, really mindless knitting now, super mindless knitting, which is awesome. But I'm just very, very happy with how all the colours have come together, how it's working, and I do have enough definitely left for probably a hat. So I will
launch into a Rambler hat.
Yeah, either just do something simple. I haven't quite decided yet, but I've got enough for a bit of a motif. Now, I don't suppose you've got the crochet tea cozy. Has that had any more progress or not?
It is living at pretty much the same level of completion as last time.
Right.
So it is still a beautiful circular construction with the beginning of the whole. Ooh, look at yours.
Well, it's not actually going to be a tea cozy.
What's it going to be?
I'm going to felt it.
Okay, I was going to say the beginning of an elegant bikini, but sure. Felt it. Yes.
Yeah, no.
Yes. That's what people want.
It would need to be bigger than that, just saying.
Not for all of our viewers, no.
So I'm going to felt it, and I am going to make a face mask.
Oh.
Well, I think. I mean, it might come out and I don't know what it'll end up at, but it's just, this is literally some scraps that I had sitting in the stash, and it's actually threadways because it's all broken in different pieces, and but it is ultra fine merino. It's like very fine merino, so it's perfect for this sort of thing because it's untreated and it should felt like that, like.
Yeah.
So
there's nothing more glorious than a well-felted object.
Yeah, and so I'm going to do that. I have sort of played around with a little bit of shaping. I do need to, obviously, because I've done a massive amount of increasing the middle there, I will need to probably run a thread through that to fill in the gaps. Oops. But with felting, it doesn't matter because you can do that. And then when it comes out, I will probably need to sort of stretch and shape it over a small little bowl or something, just to give it.
That's one of the benefits of felted and fulled fabric, right? Is you can do that very three-dimensional final forming, and it holds that shape until you wet it again.
It's incredible. Yeah, I have to admit, it really is quite incredible, and it's knitted or crocheted felt like this is so durable.
Oh yeah,
utterly durable, and yeah, you can't really make a mistake with it. So I thought that would be a bit fun to play around with, and like particularly if there is going to be there may be, I mean, we haven't had a compulsory mask order here, but it may be something that will be required. And I sort of thought, oh well, if I have to, I will have a little fun around.
Better safe than sorry.
Yeah, exactly. So that's sort of the plan with that, really. So that's what I've got going there. Have you got anything else that you've started, or have you been quite good?
I have been very good. I am extremely focused on getting this done. And
So
then
brioche on the, is it brioche on the sleeves?
no, it is twisted rib.
I did
And I have to say, I am not a huge twisted rib fan. I know a lot of people really love it.
Yeah, I'm quite fond.
I quite like working ribbing. I find it very quick. I find twisted rib quite a bit slower for me
Yeah.
personally. But I did take a page out of your book. Now, I almost always knit sleeves and magic loop, no matter how big or small they are. But you and I have the same short tip Addy set.
Yeah,
So I have two sets.
do I detect a short cable there, young man?
You detect a very short cable wrapping around this, and I have to tell you all the truth. I only started this sleeve last night at like 10 o'clock at night. So it comes along so quick on that round cable, and I only have to go down to about 20 centimeters or 8 inches for any of our Imperial watchers at home. And then you just do this one little decrease round and begin right into the cuff. Now, I will say, though, to anyone who's going to cast this on in the future, like many Stephen West patterns, there is a suggestion of an instruction without much actual instruction in the pattern for the sleeve. So when it comes to picking up the sleeve, I recommend that you count the number of rows that you have first and do a little tiny bit of division to make a ratio. Now, when we're setting up for picking up a ratio of stitches along a collar, a front, or a sleeve, we are not talking about a percentage. It's not 40%. What you actually want to do is take the number of stitches you need, so in this case, 34, and the number of rows that you have, which was 46, and you want to find the lowest common denominator, which is a good old-fashioned term for divide the top and the bottom by the same number, and then you pick up that many stitches and skip that many stitches, right, to get there, everyone. So it is a little bit of an annoying piece of math, but if you do it, unlike what I did, it will save you from having to pick up 4 times, because he says to pick up 34 stitches even, which, hello, we all think means pick up 34 stitches because that's how many there will be along the edge, because when he said it earlier in the pattern, there was that many stitches along the other edge. No, no, don't be fooled. Don't do it. Take a moment. Count those rows, place a couple markers maybe. Sometimes that's very helpful when you're picking up stitches.
I find halfway, putting a halfway marker is really useful. So then I know that I've got, like, if you've got 34, then it's like, okay, I know I've got 17 to the marker
17.
and then 17 on the other side. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And I have to say, apart from that, this might go down as one of his best written sweater patterns so far, because the instructions for it are very, very simple for the effect that you get. And I know that you are all about knits that really you can play with and kind of reshape and make your own. There is absolutely no reason why anyone couldn't take this pattern and completely customize it to fit, because he has made each size so with so much ease in it. It will actually be fully size inclusive. And if you go on and look at his test knitters on Ravelry, you will see a whole variety of bodies. There are very, very petite people. There are people who have modified the collar. There are people who are quite a bit larger than I am. And so I really had a great idea of what to do with the pattern from the beginning. And I just want to take a second to really celebrate that, because, you know, it is such a great thing to be able to go online and see what it's going to actually look like for once. You know, there was no questions. There were men who have tested it. There were women who tested it. And I'm really, really proud of, you know, the work he put into developing this pattern. For something such a simple garment, it really is, everyone. Like, it's just 2 rectangles. Okay? It's 2 rectangles. And there's no seaming. None of the dirty S word.
But also, but that's just it. I love patterns like that. I was talking to Libby about this a couple of days ago. You know, that for me, what a really wonderful pattern is not only the ease of what it is that you can create when it's written, but the ease of being able to modify it how you want it once it is written. So then you can create so many different flavors using the same template. And I love the look of that. It's really funny because when I've had that one bookmarked for a while, and I have a yarn that I've got sitting in stash at the moment, which is one that is actually very.
You have yarn? in
I
your
know. I
stash?
have yarn and stash.
I don't believe
Sweater
it.
lots even. Fancy that. Stone the crows. And it's sort of the gold actually of the colour of the painting behind you.
Oh yes, our
Yeah,
beautiful woman
it's
behind you.
beautiful. And it's one that, and I think his original sample was done in quite a
Yes,
gold,
it is
rich
done in the
gold.
gold.
Yeah, and as soon as I saw that, I thought, yeah, that would work because, as you said, it's built with a positive ease, but
Mm-hmm.
you can play around with the length. You can play around with the
The
length,
neckline
but
is
you
so
can play
goofy.
around with the neckline. So then, because you can play around with the neckline here, the shoulders then it's a
They
really
sit how you want. Yep.
exactly. I know. I have to admit, it's in my queue, and it's
And I
one I'd
am
like.
glad that you're doing it in gold so that we'll have complimentary sweaters.
Yeah, exactly.
It's
Now,
not
if you're
required,
bringing up
but
that Helen in chat has said, "Hi Marie, will you post the patterns that you wear at some point, or have you already done that?" So, Helen, yes, I have kind of done that to a point, but I don't necessarily post all of them. And part of the reason for that is that a lot of them, and this one that I'm wearing is case in point. I've worn this one a lot during the diaries. It is my go-to sloppy Joe wear around the house cardigan. It is got holes I need to do some mending, but it's a heavily modified version of an existing pattern. So I can post that. This particular one is my favorite by Georgie Nicholson or Tiki Knits. But I've done it, I mean, her original one is done with a lace panel through here. It's done in double knit. It's done all in one color. I've modified this to a 4-ply, changed the sizing, altered the color block. Yeah, I've done. So that's yeah. So yes,
so it's
I'm
a
more
little
than,
bit like the original pattern, Helen, but not at all in
not as you know
spirit
it.
or
Yeah,
function.
yeah, yeah. It's the Captain Kirk of patterns. It's exactly. It's a pattern, Jim, but not as we know it. Anyway, yeah. So that's that. I'm loving the look of that. That looks utterly, utterly fantastic. I'm just making sure everyone's saying it's very windy and cool around their places. Oh, except for Dunedin.
Oh,
Dunedin looks fabulous.
in
Are you
Christchurch,
fabulous?
it is nearly 21
Oh
and
yeah, you're
beautiful
fabulous. Yeah.
and sunny. I went for a walk this morning already. It's glorious out. I'm going to
Yeah.
go for a bike ride this afternoon too. For
Oh,
any of the Christchurch locals, this might be one of the last best days to go for a tour around Hagley Park. So do not miss out because it will be
yeah.
beautiful.
Exactly, and I think there will be a lot more people around potentially from Tuesday. Well, not necessarily, because I mean, let's face it, it's still essentially pretty much on lockdown if you
Yeah.
don't have to go back to work. But I am trying to convince my husband's sort of trying to convince me that he won't be able to do that list of jobs that I had supplied him at the beginning of lockdown. But then I did remind him that he isn't returning to work until at least level 2. So for him, it's kind of same shit, different day. Yeah, he's not buying it.
That was
Somehow.
some very wishful thinking on his part that he
Yeah, I
wasn't
think
going to get
so.
to use
He's
it.
been very, very optimistic. He did tell me yesterday he's got ironing to do, everybody, a huge pile of ironing. And 20% of that ironing is mine, 80% of it is his. So I've suggested that whilst I'm still working, he can do the ironing. He did say to me yesterday he thought about getting the ironing board out, but he didn't do the ironing because he didn't think he had enough coat hangers.
That has never happened. That has never happened in the history of anywhere. You always have more coat hangers than ironing. Let's all be honest, everyone.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, I
So
personally refuse to iron. Like, I refuse to purchase things that require ironing. I'm not gonna, like, I know myself, it's not gonna happen. So I have to be very realistic about this. Like, occasionally I go into a shop and I'm like, ooh, look at those French linen pants. And then we're like, ooh, you're never gonna press those.
yeah, see,
You'll just look homeless.
I have gone through a little bit of a linen phase lately, so I do have some items that require ironing, and of course he's got business shirts. So, and as I like to, explain to him, they were his business shirts, so therefore he should be ironing. Anyway, enough of that. Cast-ons and cast-offs. It was really interesting talking. I spoke to, I think, Suzanne Bryan. We talked a little bit about this the other day, and I know you and I have talked about this at length.
Yes.
Before. I am a really classic example, I think, of a huge number of people. I mean, I've been knitting now for 35 plus years.
Mm-hmm.
I used probably at least the first 25 of those 35 odd years, only one cast on, which was the classic cable. I know. It did everything. It did everything for me. So I didn't see the point to learn anything else. So for me, it was a cable cast on. So that's the one that I learned first. So that's the one that I stuck with. And then when I
Okay.
would get these patterns and they'd say cast on with the thumb method or long tail, I'm like, what is this thumb and long tail you speak of, people? And then when I got into that, I was like, oh, actually, this kind of makes sense, particularly for,
Yes.
ribbed bottoms and stuff. And
So,
so
yeah.
since then, my repertoire has grown. If I'm
Okay.
brutally honest, I still tend to go back and still use my two favorites. However, I do concede, and I'm a little bit more adventurous with cast offs than I am with cast ons. But
Okay.
I do concede I am rather fond of a provisional cast on, one must say, because I
Yes.
do like to be able to pick up stitches and actually work
Upwards
a.
on ribbing.
Mm,
Yeah. So, reverse direction ribbing, as it's known, is a traditionally Japanese method.
ah,
Most Japanese patterns are actually begun provisionally
mm-hmm.
in the classic format and knit in one direction or the other.
Yeah.
And then you return to the ribbing after you have brace yourselves, everyone. After you have seamed the garment, I know the stress, I can see it, and everyone's typing.
See, I'm not seeing.
After you have fully seamed the garment, you return and undo the provisional cast-ons, and you pick up the stitches in the round, and you work the ribbing in the round downwards, or flat if it's on the bottom of a cardigan downwards. What this does is the reversed direction of ribbing gives it a slightly more polished and clean look as it flows into a sewn bind off very, very smoothly. But also, it allows you to get a perfect fit on the length because you can try on the entire assembled garment and see what's gone on. So I am too a huge fan of a provisional cast on, as well, because if you're doing something like the top of a jumper neck, and you're going to be working into maybe a few added short rows to give it some collar drop, if you do that from a provisional cast on, then when you come back and pick up and knit upwards, it actually helps you to hide those wrapped stitches that you've picked up. So because it changes the direction, it actually changes the tension. And by tension, I mean where the pressure sits on the garment. And picking up those stitches adds support to the garment without adding rigidity.
Yeah. And also, and I'll be the first to admit, in this particular garment, I picked it up from the provisional cast on, I think from memory, is down here somewhere. And when I first did it and tried it on, it was too tight. And they even said that in the pattern, you may find that you might need to make alterations on the neck. And it's, I've got a very wide, I have a fat head and a wide neck. And so it wasn't going to fit. So I went, but that was the beautiful thing about it. It was so easy to just whip it back and all I needed to do was just change a needle size. I mean, I wasn't changing stitches or anything like that. It was a very, very straightforward fit. So that's that. I know I have to admit, it is something, and I think I'm just trying to remember who the other one. I know actually it's funny because Midori Hiroshi does it too. I've struck it with some of hers as well. I like it. I really like it. Now, in terms of, so for those of you who are sitting there, this is about probably the only thing I can demonstrate because I've got stuff sitting here. And let me find a yarn. Let me find a yarn.
Oh, good.
You can see it
in one color, so it won't be very clear from my end.
No, that's right. Oh, yeah. So I personally like a cabled provisional cast on as my particular favorite. I just find that's what I'm comfortable with.
I'm either a long tail or a crochet method provisional cast oner.
Yeah. So you just crochet yourself a nice big sloppy loose chain like thus. And then, I should have used that fat and neat hook that I had over there. Then, and let me find a different colour of yarn. Oh, there we go. Nice red one. Very good. And then I should have had a needle there sooner. As she goes
Louise, that's the Love Note by Tin Can Knits.
Oh, good. I'm glad you're reading the comments. Yes, I will. That
What
one.
I'm here for.
Yeah. Right. There we go. Oh, there's an end. I need an end. I need an end in my life. Oh, I've got, I know what I've gone and done. I've gone and knit something with this, and I've gone and knit it from the front and the back of the ball.
Let's see. Let's see if I can actually help today. One second, everyone. Brace yourselves.
I'll stop it. Are you going to actually put some comments in there for me? I mean, some pattern links in there for me.
Oh, I'm going to try my best.
Right. So you've got your cable cast on. You know when you do a cable chain, right? You've got the nice little love hearts of the chain at the beginning, and then you've got the little ass bumps at the back. So what you're doing,
yes,
is you are picking up your stitches through those ass bumps.
No, I don't. Could I borrow your finger for a moment?
So you're essentially, it's really straightforward. You're essentially picking up your stitches through the ass bumps there. And the trick is, I find, is to use a contrasting yarn. Lighter coloured yarn I find is better. And also a nice big fat hook, because you want to be able to...
I am also a big fan of a smooth yarn for this. So
yes,
if you have
a twist
waist cotton.
Yeah, says she who's using a nice rustic whatever yarn, because that's just what I had to hand. But there you go. Oh. So there you go. You can see that I've gone and picked those up. You can see on that side there all your little love hearts from your crochet chain. And then the stitches are through your ass bumps at the back. So when you go to undo this, you've gone and knit several rows, and you go to it. When you go to undo it, you just literally unravel it, and it should theoretically, it will just all unravel and leave live stitches all the way.
That you can just pick up.
And you can just pick them up. So,
and what's great about the method that you just described as well is if you, and just as a side note, if you're someone who likes to do a provisional cast on with a long tail cast on, you will actually have one less stitch than what you begin with. So when you do it with a long tail, because of the way that you start that first stitch, you actually have to cast on one extra, because it gets absorbed when you pick up the other stitches.
Of course, yes.
Using the long tail provisional method, which is what I usually do because I am exceedingly pedantic and refuse to bring a crochet hook into my life unless I absolutely have to. I know, you can't believe it. So, speaking of long tail, now I am going to wax and pontificate about cast-ons now, everyone, so brace yourselves. Now might be a time to go get a coffee.
Right, I'm just going to... Oh, wrong way around. I'm just going to do this. So I can knit and he can talk. So this is excellent.
So, cast-ons. I'm a big believer that there is a proper cast-on and proper bind-off for every situation. I am a multi-cast-on and bind-off user. I try to normally follow what a pattern suggests for it, assuming that the designer has thought it through. However, as we all know, sometimes designers have their own favorite methods, just like we knitters do, because they are knitters first, designers second usually. So it's important to remember that you should consider the purpose of the cast on before you decide which one to use. So if you are thinking about it as the foundational edge or finishing edge of your garment, you want to think about what you want from that edge. So does it need to have stiffness? Does it need to hold the shape that you've given the garment? Do you want it to stretch and rebound so that it expands to a shape and then comes back on itself? Do you want it to expand and stay stretched? Do you want it to have a decorative purpose, perhaps a picot, or believe it or not, you can actually incorporate a bobble right into a cast-off edge. I do not recommend it. So for all of those different reasons, do you need it to add structural stability? If you're thinking about the purpose of a button band on a garment, it can add structural stability to that. So what are we looking for in the cast-on? Now, I tend to start from what I consider the simplest cast-ons and bind offs and work up to the more complex. So today I'm only going to demonstrate cast ons. I'm not going to demonstrate any bind offs because you have to actually knit something for that to happen, and I'm sure you don't want to actually listen to me for 2 full hours. So starting from the beginning, I have my giant teaching needles out and some delightfully large light colored yarn so that I can show you a couple of cast-ons that I don't have examples of here with me at the moment. Yes, that is a landline. No, it doesn't work. Don't try to call us. We're not interested. So most cast-ons are going to start from a slip knot. If you can't tie a slip knot, I have what I consider the easiest method. I call it the hippie methodology of slip knots. Why? Because you use a peace symbol. That's right. So if we all remember how to make a peace symbol, you tuck your thumb here. What you do first is you grab the yarn and hold on to it. You want the tail away from you. You wrap around your fingers and slide it through. Okay? See what I did there? Boop, 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 boop. Now, you pull that guy taut. You slip the needle through, and I like to make the sliding knot the one that is attached to the ball of yarn. And that is how you make a slip knot. Now, the very easiest cast on is the backwards loop or thumb cast on, or as I like to say it so that it sticks in your head, hitchhiker. So what we do is we hold the needle in our dominant hand. In my case, that's my right hand. And we take the yarn into our non-dominant hand, which for me is my left. And what I like to do is simply take the thumb, scoop towards yourself to wrap it around, creating this single loop around that thumb so that it is crossed over on top. So the yarn coming from the needle crosses over the top. You slide down to the base, that fleshy part of your thumb. And to be clear, base of your thumb, tip of your thumb. I've heard a lot of disagreements over this over the years somehow. Base, tip. Perfect. Then we slide it off and onto the needle. And we simply move along doing this. Now, you will most likely come across this particular cast-on method when you're doing an underarm.
Yeah.
Why? Because it's easy to pick up stitches out of this particular type of cast-on. Because when you knit into it initially, you're not actually knitting into anything, you're knitting into half of a knot. So the first row that you work into this sort of cast-on closes the knot, but leaves you a space that you can easily slide the needle through when you're coming back to pick it up. I do not recommend this cast on for anything under the underarms or somewhere where you're going to be picking up the stitches out of it, because it is not structurally sound, meaning you're not creating an actual stitch. When you do a cable cast on where you knit the stitches on, or a long tail cast on method where you're using 2 strands to actually, with your hand, knit the stitches onto the needle, you're creating a stable line of stitches. And from that, you can do a lot of things because it will hold the width that you are looking for when you knit upwards. However, unless you have almost perfect tension, you will end up with an uneven edge from this particular cast on, especially if you're going into stockinette or garter stitch, which, as we both know, all know, because there's more than 2 of us here, is the most common way that you're going to knit upwards from this. So backwards loop, definitely the easiest one to do. If you have a beginner that's really struggling with cast-ons, this is the one to show them. However, only use it for underarms. Now, I do have an example of a long tail cast-on, 2 different ones. One that's been used to make the top neck of this cute little anchor suit, which was knit for my niece, who by the time it gets to her, courtesy of the global situation, she'll probably be too big for it. So all of you can enjoy it. It's very cute. I normally don't knit for babies. I'm not going to lie. I didn't actually make this. The delightful Katie made it for me because I am blessed.
I was just about to say, was it our favourite sample knitter that made that pajama?
Yes, it was. She might literally be the world's greatest sample knitter. I don't know.
Yeah, Katie does a lot of samples for us as well. She is the world's greatest sample knitter.
No, literally she is. I don't know what I would do without her. I mean, probably lie on the floor and pray for death. So this is the long tail method here, and it creates this nice semi-stretchy edge that also gives good structure. And this one utilizes a simple passed stitch bind off, where you're passing the one stitch in pattern over the next stitch, which creates the matching edge that has a little bit of stretch, but also just a touch of stiffness so that the garment isn't going to stretch out forever too far. Now, that long tail method can also be used for something like a rectangular wrap. Now this one is cast on from both ends and knit into the middle. This is Fading Point by Joji Locatelli. And you can see here that what I've done is started with the cast on edge right there and continued by using garter stitch to extend outwards. So that little tab, right there, is a long tail cast on into a garter stitch tab. Now that's using two methods together. So that's taking the long tail cast on, working a garter tab, and picking up out of those stitches to continue. I really, really enjoy that sort of an edge because it makes a beautiful and clean situation. And Margaret, I do see what you've said there about the backwards loop.
I've just looked at that too, yeah.
Yeah, followed by a purl row. Now, a lot of people do not have consistent tension with their purl stitches. So that is something to keep in mind, is it's really heavily influenced by your own tension.
Yeah.
Now, if that's a concern for you, you can actually do a provisional cast on and pick up every other stitch out of it to create the same sort of stretchy edge. And that's a little bit more complicated. And I believe that you can find it on Helene Magnuson's website for some of her Icelandic style bottom up shawls, where it looks in reverse like the Icelandic bind off, which I don't have an example of today because I don't have either of my Icelandic shawls with me.
And I also know there's some sock knitters that are very, very fond of backward loops, and I can never remember whether it was for cuff down or toe up because I hate knitting socks. So if you're a sock knitter,
I would assume it's.
You're like me, you're not a fond sock knitter either, are you?
I knit socks because I like wearing them, but I don't like knitting them, if that makes any sense.
Do you know whether it's a toe up? I know James uses it a lot, I think.
I am a big, when I do toe up, I do the
Judy's Magic.
Judy's Magic cast on. I think it's for Knitty in 2008. Yeah. Wow, Knitty in 2008. There's a woo blast from the past. Yeah. Remember when, oh, right, because it was in that, like, Jenny's Surprisingly Stretchy Bind Off came out first, and then Judy's Magic Cast On came out like a month later. God, pioneers of knitting, those women.
It came out.
Oh, Bev says it's for toe up.
Oh, toe up. Thanks, Bev. I knew it was. I knew there was. Perfect. It was one or the other. It's and actually, and in a way that makes sense because backward loop is kind of half of Judy's Magic Cast On.
Yes, it is.
Judy's Magic Cast On is sort of kind of like a.
Yeah, you're passing it back and forth over the tips of two needles.
Two needles. Yeah.
Now, so what I like to do for the long tail method, I use the slingshot method. I like the yarn coming from the ball over my thumb and the yarn coming from the tail over my thumb and the yarn coming from the ball over my finger. At the end of the day, it doesn't matter which one goes where, it's personal preference. Now, I do not like to start this with a slip knot. So I showed you how to make a slip knot just a minute ago. I'm going to do a very quick demonstration of this. What I do is I take the yarn, I slide my index finger and my thumb of my non-dominant hand, which is my left hand, into it. Then I spread the legs, I wrap around the stitches, and I create that slingshot shape, like if you were pulling back to make a slingshot, right? Instead of starting with a slip knot, what I do is I take the needle, I press down into the yarn in between, and I simply loop it around to make a tight twist. This means that you don't have that bump on the edge of either side of your long tail cast on. Then what I do very simply, or not, let's get my hand out of the way here, or not so simply, is I come down to the outside edge of the base of my thumb. I come up and through that section, over to the index finger, and I pull down and through. Bottom edge of the thumb, up and over to the index finger, down and through. And you just repeat that until you have the number of stitches needed for it. And it will leave you a tail, hence the name long tail cast on, hanging out of it. And you can knit that tail in, you can weave it in later, you can secure it by slipping this first stitch onto the other needle and passing it through. There's a whole bunch of methods. What you physically see though, is it creates a row of actual stitches. You can see it more clearly from the wrong side. There are the purl bumps. And from the right side, you can see those little knitted V's. So you're making actual stitches with this method, just like a knitted on cast on. Now, this is probably in North America the most popular method of casting on, and people use it for everything. It is not suitable for everything, in my not at all humble opinion. Everyone, welcome to the party. I think it's great if you have something that is going to need a little bit of structure along an edge.
Yeah.
So if you're knitting a sweater bottom up and you know that you're going to want a set circumference because it's going to have some positive ease to it, this is definitely the method to go with. You know what I mean? If you are going to be making a set width shawl or starting at the top of a shawl, go ahead with this. I know it is very, very popular for hats. I do not recommend that. If you go up a few needle sizes, you can get a little more stretch on the edge, but I don't recommend doing that because it is much more difficult. So the long tail is not one of my favorite methods for sure. I do use it when it's appropriate because there's a cast on for every purpose, like I said at the beginning of our little chat, but I don't think it's perfect for everything. Now, one of the most versatile styles of cast on, because there are actually 4 or 5 different types of it, is the cable cast on. I'm going to do a very quick demonstration of it first, and then I'm going to pick up some garments, and we're going to go through all of the variations of the cable cast on. Now, the cable cast on and the knitted on cast on are closely related, except in the cable cast on, you are working between the stitches as opposed to knitting into every stitch. So a knitted on cast on, for those of you at home, as a quick reminder, is where we insert in. Oh, and to be clear with the long tail cast on, you can cast on knitwise and purlwise. There is another method where you do a twisted method, which is often referred to as the German twisted method. There is a double twisted method that involves more, and those are all slightly stretchier and can disappear into ribbing, but it does leave a visible edge that is just like a bind off edge where you're classically passing stitches over at the end, okay? Now, knitted on cast on. We've got a slip knot on the needle, and I've inserted my other needle through as if to knit. We wrap around as if to knit, we pull through, and we put that stitch on. Then we go into the new stitch that we just added as if to knit, and we knit the next stitch on. So on and so forth ad nauseum. It does make a lovely little detail along the edge. However, this method is not particularly flexible or stretchy. So if you are knitting something that requires a specific bottom width, you must be very cautious about your tension because too tight and it will pucker at the bottom.
Yeah.
So,
and also, to the other nice thing with that cast on as well is that if you are having to, like, if you have got, you don't want any stretch across that bottom.
yeah.
But the nice thing about that cast on is you don't have to worry about estimating the length of your tail.
No, not at all, because you're working from the
You're
bottom.
just working as you go. So it's
Totally.
From that perspective, yeah, it's quite easy.
That's why I also love, and I know you're a big fan of the cable cast on.
Yeah, I am.
And it's why I prefer the cable cast on because it gives you that little bit of stretch so you don't have to worry so much about your tension and you can create something really beautiful. What I love is you insert into that slip knot as if to knit, you wrap around, you slip it down and through just like you would with the knitted cast on. Except now what we're going to do is from front to back, we're going to insert between those two stitches. So see there on the needle, we're between them. Yes, we got it. Perfect. Wrap around as if to knit, pulling down and through and placing that stitch onto the needle. And you repeat going in between the stitch just cast on in the previous stitch all the way across. Now, you can use this for underarms. You can use this in the middle of a garment to add stitches if you're going to be creating a pocket. You can use it for a more structurally sound edge along the bottom of a piece. And once you can do the simplest method of the cable cast on, you can do any of them. In appearance, it is most similar to a hybrid between the long tail cast on and the knitted on cast on. From the front, it looks almost identical to a knitted on cast on, except you can see how there's a little bit more space between the stitches, meaning that there's a little bit more fabric here. And on the back, you see the beautiful purl bumps. Now, to alternate, as someone mentioned in the comments, what you do is after you've cast on that first stitch knitwise, you come from back to front, so you're pointing the needle directly at you. Don't aim for the face. We love your faces. We don't want them damaged by a rogue needle. You wrap around as if to knit or purl, depending on how your brain likes to think about it. Whoop. It's very hard to do with these long, straight needles. Not used to anything, well, not used to anything this straight. Then we insert into the next one from front to back as if to knit. We wrap around, pull down and through, okay? So again, for a purl stitch, from back to front, wrap around as if to purl, pull it through and on.
Now,
yes.
The thing I love about cable cast on, I know I teach a lot of beginners using cable cast on, is because you're using your needle, and I'm just going to jump this so people don't have to peer down at me and look at little me, because you're popping your needle between each stitch, it's almost like you're applying a tensioning. And see, when you do a backwards loop cast on or even a knitted cast on, if you're a beginner, because we're all a little bit uptight, very uptight as a beginner, whereas a cable cast on actually forces you to, it provides you with that tensioning. And I often always too with a beginner will give them, if they're knitting something on a 4mm needle, I'll have them actually cable cast on a 4.5 or even a 5mm.
About to be interrupted by Kat.
Oh, hey Pedro.
Good morning. I think that one's Penny. It's a Penny.
Penny, is it?
We've got two.
And it's just a really good way for them to actually get that tensioning right.
Yes, exactly.
Get your tensioning right. And also with the underarm, you mentioned before with the underarm. So I do both, either cable cast on or backwards loop. So like, for example, for this one, I did backwards loop.
Yes.
And as you can see, and let's find the underarm here, people. There it is. So when I picked it up, it is practically invisible, right?
No, exactly.
So it's great.
With the cable cast on the inside, as you know, you can see it.
Yes.
You know, there's that little ridge.
Yes,
but
which you don't mind.
More stable.
Yes, it is more stable. So if you're getting to an underarm and you're wanting to do a cable cast on and you're knitting along and it says cast on, now when you do a backwards loop, it's easy because you just flick those loops on your needle and then away you go. You keep going. If you're doing a cable cast on, and they never put this in the instructions, and if you're a beginner, it's one of those, well, it wasn't in the instructions, you need to rotate your work
wrong side.
Look your cable cast ons and then rotate your work back the other way.
Exactly.
You're not mad. It's just something that, and I mean, you would have striked that as an editor all the time. It's just something they don't put in the instructions.
It is
an assumption that you should know that.
Honestly, I have one designer that I work with who never forgets it. And I literally, in every email, thank her for remembering to put that in. She is the best for that. Now, what do we use cable cast-ons for? Rib cable and otherwise. I'm going to show you a whole stack of methods for using the cable cast-on. What we're going to start with is a alternating cable cast-on using one color. So that means switching between knit and purl stitches. Now, this one is to go into brioche. So what it does is it creates this beautiful edge that flows smoothly into the brioche. When I bring it up close, you can see that there are knit stitches and purl stitches here in the very edge that flow up into the brioche. And because this is two-color brioche, but I did a one-color cast on the opposite side, you can see how it still disappears invisibly, but it creates a beautiful decorative singular knit stitch at the very beginning of the row. Now, this one, in order to get the proper tension for flowing into brioche using the alternate cabled cast on, I actually recommend holding them double, so using two strands of the color that you're casting on with, because it gives you a little bit of a meatier edge to work out of. Mm-hmm. This is the Skip Hat by Jared Flood, if you're interested in it. And I would recommend doing it up in two contrasting yarns, high contrast in color, high contrast in shade. Possibly, if you're interested, I honestly think Baby Bandit would be fantastic for it. And using two different textures is really fun. So if you have something with a little bit of mohair in it or something like that that you want to experiment with, do take a look around for that. Now, the other way that you can use the alternating cable cast on in a single color is to go into ribbing on a colorwork project. This is the Orfeo Cowl by Amy Vanderlaar. And I have actually changed the cast on this project because I believe that the rib cabled is superior for going into a corrugated rib. I've again cast on in one color, as you can see from the bright red here, which is Carnival. And then I have gone into using the blue tarnished for the pearl stitches. But when you look down at the edge, it still disappears invisibly into the ribbing, which I think is really great. And I have finished this by using that cast on that I showed at the very beginning, the bind off, the alternating ribbed cabled bind off, which is a method where you purl two together on pearl stitches by returning the first stitch back to the needle, and you knit two together using knit stitches by returning the first stitch back to the needle. It is definitely a more intermediate level cast off, but it produces a beautiful edge that has a slight amount of stretch to it and a really glorious finish that matches your bind off so that they're perfectly symmetrical, which I am really into emotionally. Now, you can also do a regular cable cast on, so just knit stitches, but using two colors to go into brioche. And this creates a beautiful braided effect along the bottom edge of your piece, just like this. And this is the Excuse Me hat by Stephen West. Now, it makes a fully reversible two-color cast on, and I think that is just dynamic. It shows you the versatility of this cast on, and it really works to reinforce the color patterning in the brioche. From either side, it's equally beautiful, and you have that beautiful braided look along the bottom edge. And there's no other way except for a Latvian braided cast on, which is much more complicated to get this sort of a look. You simply do the first stitch in the first color and the second stitch in the second color. Oh, the bind off is the ribbed cabled bind off. So it's the same as the cast on. It's just using it as a bind off instead. Now, the final way that we can do a cable cast on is to then go ahead and work a few tubular rows, which is where you slip the stitches, you knit one stitch, bring the yarn forward, slip the next stitch purlwise, and then you repeat that on the opposite working row. When you're knitting flat, of course, you just do the same row again. When you're working in the round, the next row is purl one, move the yarn to the back, slip the next stitch purlwise, purl the following stitch, continue around the whole row. Nora Gahn improvised this method by combining the tubular cast on and the beautiful alternate cable cast on. And I only have this in a very dark yarn, which I apologize for. This is on the edge of my Geiger cardigan. Now I'm going to try to get you as much light as possible on this by using my very pale skin as a backdrop here. Now, what you can see possibly is that it creates a dense and thick cast on that has an incredible amount of stretch, but as soon as you release it, it returns right back to shape. That is a fantastic attribute, and it does not require any additional tools or provisional cast-ons to do this, which I really appreciate. And just quickly, a bind-off method that actually goes very well with a more decorative cast-on is, of course, a picot bind-off method. There are multiple ways to work a picot bind-off, but as you can see, it creates these beautiful little openings with a small peak at the top. I highly recommend this for the edges of shawls. It's beautiful at the top of a sock. Yeah. If you know someone who's a little bit, how do the youth say it? Extra, I believe is the terminology they've taken to, because, you know, everyone, we were running out of words in the English language, so we should repurpose them apparently. And so all of those cast-off methods are actually taught to you in the Geiger pattern by Nora Gahn, which is this fabulously fitted little jacket. If anybody has some nicks kicking around in their stash, I highly recommend this for that. Or if you have bohemia worsted dreams of a perfect work cardigan, that's the one. Beautiful shaping, great structure.
And the picot cast-on's fun too. I've done that before as well. Particularly if you're doing like
a cuff.
Cuffs. You know, gloves and stuff, that's loads of fun.
And I want to stress that the picot cast on and bind off, those are my garments. are not a gendered thing. Even boys like decoration, okay? So, second last, but definitely not least, is my possibly all time favorite cast on. There are multiple ways to work this next cast on. You can do it provisionally, you can do it in the Italian method, you can do it in two colors. So, the tubular cast on is not a singular technique, it is a family of techniques that creates the same edge by using one strand of yarn to create the cast on, or in the provisional method, a provisional cast on, and then you do several working what are called tubular rows, where you slip every other stitch to add extra fabric to the edge to give it stretch and rebound. Now, in my own forthcoming pattern that Marie and Deb have yet to pick colors for, if you're seeing this hat and thinking you've seen it before, it was on the cover of Yarn People, issue number 3. This is the Queen hat, Queeng. You can go check it out on Ravelry if you like. This guy uses a 1x1 tubular cast on. What this does is it creates these beautiful individual stitches. It is a fully reversible cast on, so both sides look the same on the edge. You can see that it looks slightly thicker when you stare at the edge dead on. And the reason for that are those little bars in between the stitches. So you see the central knit stitch and then that little bar on either side and that little bar in between it. Those are little pieces of extra fabric that you have left in there by working those slipped rows. And what it does is it creates a stretchy edge that will last for years and continuously rebound back to its original shape, even in a superwash yarn. So when you're doing something like the brim of a hat, especially where it's going to stretch over my big fat melon for years, and when I like to do a deep turned up cuff like this, you're able to have it pull on and simply stretch out along the edge. And then the moment you take it off, it disappears. Now, in this hat, I've also done a sock finishing method to the top where you knit upwards all the way to the crown and you do a Kitchener stitch grafting to finish it. Grafting stitches together is also how you work a tubular bind off. If you're doing a 2x2 tubular bind off, you work tubular rows, 2 of them, slipping the purl stitches or the knit stitches, working the oppositional stitches, the yarn in front as if to purl when you're purling, in the back as if to knit when you're knitting. And the great thing about a tubular cast on, when you're doing it provisionally, is it's incredibly, I was going to say incredibly easy, but I always get yelled at when I say that. It is very possible to do a 2x2 tubular cast on, and we all love 2x2 ribbing because it's a little bit quicker than 1x1. And that looks just like this. So you get the same kind of stitches stacked together. It is a little bit more complicated to do. It involves using a cable needle to rearrange the stitches, but it is also fully reversible, as you can see on the hem of this sweater. It has that beautiful stretch. You can see those extra bars in between connecting the stitches, and it just rebounds in such a lovely way. It creates this slightly thicker edge that will, again, last forever and has a beautiful assistance to the drape of any garment. Now, when you are done and you're getting up to the edging, and spoiler alert, I love a high neck on pretty much anything. So half the stuff I knit has a turtleneck. Don't worry, I have a big neck. When you are working upwards, this is finished with that 2x2 tubular cast off. And what you do is you work the tubular rows, you separate the knit and purl stitches onto different needles, and you proceed to work the classic Elizabeth Zimmerman sewn bind off, where you Kitchener stitch or graft the stitches together, and it creates an identical edge to the cast on. This is by far the most symmetrical cast on and cast off method. You can do it for 2x2 and 1x1 ribbing. There is also a method for doing it in 3x3. The cast on is much more complicated when you're doing 3x3 or when you're doing an uneven number like a 2 knit 1 purl situation. So if you're doing that, you're going to have to do a little bit of playing around to get it to work, but it will work quite well for you. Now, last but not least, I figured we could have a little chat about modular casting on, which is where you do casting on from the edge of an object. So I have a few examples here really quickly. We're just going to go through them. This is Deb's incredible Exploration Station shawl by Stephen West. Spoiler alert, all of these examples are from Stephen West because he really uses cast-ons in a very creative method. What we've got here is a I-cord cast on. So it's very challenging to see no matter what the color of the yarn is, but you're actually casting on with just these few stitches here. So you work a very small piece of I-cord, you turn it on its end, you pick up stitches out of the edge of the I-cord, and then you pick up the cast on stitches as well to create this incorporated I-cord border that continues along the whole edge of the garment.
And I have to say that cast on, for me, is a much nicer, cleaner cast on than the garter tab cast on.
The garter tab cast on can be a really hot mess. Like, if you are not extremely proficient at picking up stitches, it's very hard to tell in garter stitch what you're supposed to be picking up, where you should be picking up from. Yeah. Like, you end up with all sorts of weirdness.
And you quite often get this funny little nipple at the top, and it's difficult to actually get, because then it often follows with garter stitch along the edge. I just find that whenever I see that now, I just instantly change it to that I-cord.
The I-cord one is just a little bit more polished, a little bit cleaner. This sweater that I was holding up was McCoy by the red one is McCoy by Veronique Avery, and the navy one is Geiger by Nora Gone. And the bright blue one is Extra Texture by Stephen West, because I am a jumper monster, everyone. Now, if you're thinking about a really bold way to start a project, the easiest example that we've got for you is, of course, the Starflake shawl, which also leads into the Starflanket blanket. If any of you are interested in doing that, we're going to be putting up some really fun kits on the Outlaw website for that soon, so pay attention. This little beauty is worked by creating each of these parallelograms that you then pick up the next parallelogram from. So if you can see those oppositional color stitches, that's where you've picked up along the edge to make each new parallelogram. And then what you do is you come back along to the top corner here, and you pick up all of the rest of the stitches along the edges of the parallelogram and work downwards. This sort of modular cast on gives you a great deal of stability at the top, but allows the piece to be flexible and stretch out and create that glamorous butterfly shape that we all love from this shawl. And what's also lovely about it is it allows you to pick up the same stitches from the edge there and continue that I-cord all the way down to the bottom, which allows you to create a beautiful edge that's got structure to hold up your wing, but also stretch to allow it to breathe. And then this one is finished by continuing on that I-cord border right over the edge and working into a 2-color I-cord cast off that we also showed you on Deb's incredibly graphic triangulate shawl. So that is a modular type of cast on where you're making something and then picking up out of it, okay? Last but not least, in that same vein, is the shawl of 1,000 cast-ons. So if you're adventurous and you want to go on a journey, I highly recommend the West Fjords Wanderer. It's a very small project, so, you know...
I think, what was it, 11 balls of Bohemia in that behemoth?
Yes, there are 11 balls of Bohemia sport in this incredible celebration of yarny goodness and garter stitch. Now, to be honest, there are no crazy techniques in here. We've talked about this extensively, both Marie and I. We love a well-utilized, simple technique. This thing is entirely garter stitch, stockinette, and a little bit of feather and fan. There is nothing here that is going to throw you under the bus. Stephen has made something knittable, gasp, and wearable, double gasp, and beautiful, triple gasp. So, how this beastie gets going, though, is quite creative, and you have to kind of wear it to show it, because it's challenging. What you do is you begin with these parallelogram triangle wedges down here. what you've done is you cast on boop, 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 along this edge right here using I-cord, and you continue the I-cord up on either edge of it, and you work along and create our long snaking ribbony border. Do, 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 do. And you end on the same color if you're like me and have counted the wedges in advance. Um, you're welcome, everyone.
Why,
I'm not
course
sorry I'm
you
like
have.
this. Pardon?
Why, of course you have.
Well, you know, a little bit of planning goes a long way, and a lot of planning goes a really long way. Then what you do is you flip it over, and you pick up again out of the entire edge. Again, using that method where you pick up from the very edge of the I-cord so that it continues invisibly upwards, and just along the whole back of this I-cord cast on. Then you incorporate that I-cord all the way up the edge. I'm showing you the wrong side because it's a little bit more visible. Right there, all the way up. And to finish it off, you simply graft it together at the top. And as Marie mentioned, with that garter tab cast on, you get a little bit of a nipple. But when you do an I-cord cast on, you do not.
You do not.
However, when you do the double I-cord bind off at the top, you also do not. It creates that beautifully smooth edge again, and it perfectly matches the cast on method.
And I'm just going to hold this up because he also, I think he first played around with this in
the Doodler. Oh, yes.
So there is that original cast on edge through the center there. So I have picked that up.
Yeah.
Going into the end, and then there it is.
Bound off again.
Bound off again, and it's, there you go. Look at that.
And so that's a little tour to cast on, bind off with Ethan and Marie. We covered a few methods.
We did. We've done very, very well. Now, there've been a whole lot of questions in here. So a lot of them are like, very impressed with your teaching, and I should have Ethan teaching at CAN. Well, up until I deferred CAN, I did have Ethan booked in for 4 sessions at CAN. So I was ahead of you there, team. I was all go, but of course, you know.
We'll get there.
Yeah. Epidemiology got in the way. But that's all right. We will get there.
Doesn't it always?
I know. So I have worked very, very hard to try and get all of those links in there. There was another question in there. Is there a way of having a look at this again? So yes, there is. So this sits up on the Skeins, the main Skeins Facebook page, and it will actually, once we're finished, you can actually go back and refer to it. But you may actually find it easier to go over and have a look at it once we're done here. I then download this and upload it onto YouTube, onto our Skeins YouTube channel, and I now put all the pattern links into the description, so you're not having to trawl through comments to find what you're looking for. So I pop all of those into the description, and they just make them easier for you to find. So you can find those across there. If I haven't put anything up into the description, it's generally because I've forgotten, or and if I have and you've picked that up and someone else is there, please place them there for me, or it's because it's something that is so heavily modified that I haven't bothered to do it, or Ethan and I do quite a few things out of our heads, and especially me, and I don't always write stuff down.
I'm guilty of having like 6 patterns in the works at the moment, and one that's finished, and I just haven't knit a new sample to take new photos in yarn I prefer. So we will we'll get there.
Yeah, I mean, I think we will get there. So it is all good. So that was fantastic. God, that was so good. I love it when you do most of the talking. It's excellent.
I'm just here to help, Marie.
I know. So tomorrow, do come and join me again tomorrow. I'm going to finish off my conversation around pilling and yarn construction, and Ethan and I, as always, will find something to talk about next week, because we always do. And so we so struggle. We so struggle to fill the time. But until then, I hope everyone has a really restful Anzac weekend. And I know many were up early this morning. I was up early. So have a nice restful weekend. I will talk to Ethan again, obviously. So now breakfast bourbons will be on for breakfast bourbons tomorrow.
Yes, we're gonna try to
There's no more rum in the house.
Yeah, we're out of rum, which is what happened last week, is we drank all of the rum. And for those of you who don't know Deb and I personally, when we say we drank all of something, it's never like one or two. So
No.
we were a little rough.
Yes. Yes. So so breakfast bourbons tomorrow on the Outlaw Lair at 9:30.
Yes, indeedy.
Excellent. So
9:30, we'll be here.
And the other thing,
drinking.
too, just to remind people, is that, yes, our web store is up and running again, and we will be dispatching hot off the press on Tuesday. So those will be going out. So obviously stuff coming in over the weekend will be picked and packed Tuesday, Wednesday. But yes, we are dispatching again. And as is
HQ is open too. So don't be shy. Come on by and say hello.
Yeah, especially if
you
you're...
Sorry, HQ's website is open. Pardon me.
Yes, it's not the actual physical location, just the website.
No, you cannot come to, you get, like, if you're really desperate, you can drive slowly down Stanley Street as long as you're already on your way to do something else essential. Hear my words. And you can gaze longingly at the sign as you pass by. However, do not come into the parking lot. Do not come inside. The door is definitely locked.
So outlawyarn.com is the
outlawyarn.com.
Outlawyarn.com is the address of the shop. I emphasize.com is the address of the shop. And so especially good if you're a South Islander, because then you don't have to wait those extra days for it to, cross the ditch from me in the North Island. So, yeah, and there's definitely things. We were out of stock of a few things. So if you're looking for specific colours, you may as well get it direct from Mother Bear at the warehouse because she's bound to have it. So
don't feel bad to flick us through an email either, through the contact link there, and also find us on Instagram. Find me on Instagram. I'm EBE Forever. It's a mystery. I've had the same handle since I was 11. I'm not changing it. You're stuck with it, folks.
Oh, see, the thing that actually makes me laugh is you were 11 and when Instagram was around, Deb and I can still remember when cell phones came out. But anyway,
it started off as an email handle, thank you. It was not 11 when Instagram came out. I'm not that fetal. Calm down.
Oh dear. There you go. All right, everybody. I will be back tomorrow. Ethan and Deb will be at the Outlaw Lair tomorrow for breakfast bourbon at 9:30. And until then, have a great weekend.
See you next weekend.